Hello! This video is about one of those buzzwords. A word that I'm sure you have heard used by at least one person, if not many. The word is toxic. Now, why the quotation marks? Because I look at this a little different than a lot of people do. And so this is a good place for me to say, like anything on my channel, it's just me sharing my opinions. You don't have to make them your truth. If it doesn't resonate with you, then don't worry about it. I will just put in a little disclaimer there, though, that a lot of the things I talk about are the things I have found out about myself that are not all that flattering. And so I know, they can make us squirm a little bit and think, oh, no, I don't really want to look at that. No, that couldn't be me. That doesn't resonate. That could not be me. Sometimes we're just a little bit in denial that things could apply to us, and there is that possibility here. That's all I'm saying. If it really doesn't resonate, then click off and no offense is taken. But it is one of those squirmy kinds of things. So the way I look at this is people are not born toxic. I don't believe that people are toxic. There are bad behaviors for sure. But I don't believe that something becomes toxic until a bad behavior is accepted. You know, this Mr. or Ms. bad behaving person can be doing all sorts of things. And yes, they're not great behaviors, but they can't be toxic as in harmful until there is a person being affected by the behavior that accepts it. In my view. So I'm not thrilled by the way I see it used because, you know, in spirituality, there's an emphasis on seeing that we have to be accountable for ways we contribute. And let me make clear right now, I'm not talking about abusive situations. No one ever deserves to be abused. I'm not talking about someone contributing and then deserving to be abused. It's a whole other subject and it's not part of this video, so please don't get me wrong. I'm talking about behavior that makes someone not feel good about themselves to the point it becomes harmful. And then we have a toxic situation. So no, we're not talking about something where someone is trapped. Because let's face it, a lot of times in abusive situations it can feel like we can't get out. I'm talking about situations where this person can say, I deserve to be treated better. Keep that bullshit to yourself. Don't talk to me that way. Don't even try that because I'm not going to put up with it. When we don't do that and we accept it knowing that it's bullshit and we deserve better from Mr. or Ms. bad behavior, then we have a toxic situation. But as you can see, it took two hands here. So it can't be this, that son of a bitch or that whatever. To become a toxic situation, it has to also be, it couldn't be toxic unless I put up with it. And that may be uncomfortable for many people to understand. It's easier to say that someone is toxic than it is to admit that we accepted it, and often for a long time, before we realized, no, it just had to end. So this video is going to look at things from a psychology standpoint, but also a metaphysical standpoint, because there is something to this that you're probably not going to hear coming up in articles that are just about the psychological part of it. And I want to start out with how you might identify that you are experiencing bad behavior. And notice I'm not going to say toxic behavior until we add that you're accepting it. If you're not sure that you are in a toxic situation, these are some points to consider. One is that you are being affected emotionally by the drama that someone is bringing into your life. It's not your drama. You're not even wanting to participate in it, and yet it is affecting you in a negative way, of course. You may have a person that you dread having to be around. You may not have examined why that is. You just know when there's an opportunity, you're not all that excited about it. You may always find that you are suddenly drained of energy, or you're just pissed off when you're around a person. And it's not just a one-time thing. It's every time. There's always something that's triggering, and it just sucks the energy right out of you. If you have a person in your life that is making you feel bad about yourself or ashamed of who you are, that's a big one. Now, if there's someone in your life and you are trying to fix them or rescue them, and you have this ideal in your mind of who they could be if they would only just let you come in and do a little tweaking, yeah, not so good. If you say no and it's brushed off as if you said nothing, that's another red flag. If you feel like you're always having to filter what you say, if you're always feeling like you're walking on eggshells around a person, there's a sign for you. If you are around a person who makes you act contrary to your own values, is another thing to consider. Or if you just kind of check out emotionally and you're just kind of there but not there. And the last one is if you feel like you're being controlled. All these things, if they are repeated and repeatedly tolerated, can be toxic situations. The way I look at it, something can be a toxic situation if it's making you feel like crap, and yet you continue to expose yourself to it. So it's not that the person is toxic. The behaviors are not kind, but they can't be a toxic situation unless you are continuing to expose yourself to it. It takes two. Now, if you don't like that because you want to not see yourself as having a responsibility to do anything about it, if you are saying to yourself, why should I have to say something about it? They should know better. Let me just throw out that in my opinion, not necessarily. So I don't know if you know someone like this, but there are plenty of daddies that think their daughters are little princesses. and no matter what they do, it's adorable. So if the little princess never has her family correct a behavior, she could very well carry it into her adulthood, not knowing that it's not cool. Instinctively, the little princess is going to surround herself with friends that are also going to think everything she does is wonderful and who won't call her on her behavior. So, should she know better? She may not, if she has only been around people that suck up to her. That's the only way I can say it. And there are plenty of mothers that think their sons walk on water. If the son is a player, the mother might say, that's just how men are. If the son is a bit controlling and likes to tell his woman how it's going to be, it could be that that's the way the mother has raised him to think is appropriate. It may be how she was with her spouse or her partner. That's just the way men are. So, can we say we shouldn't have to say anything because they should know better? Not necessarily, because we do tend to attract people who will reflect back to us how we feel about ourselves. So if you have a woman or a man who has never been told that their behavior is less than attractive or less than kind, then they're going to find people who think that how they act is just totally cool. So, if you recognize that you're just not feeling good, and yet you keep exposing yourself to the behavior that makes you not feel good about yourself, it may also be because you don't know anything different. It may be that you have always been treated badly. You don't have the self-esteem. You don't feel your own worth. You figure that's just how it is for someone like you. Now, I say that with no judgment. This was me. Not calling people on bad behavior because it's what I deserved. So no judgment here, trust me. So what we're going to move into is why it's important that we say something. There is never any valid reason to allow toxic behavior in your life. You are worth better. You do deserve to be treated well. You don't deserve to feel bad about yourself. People that are empathetic and understanding, that think it is important to forgive, are most at risk of making excuses for bad behavior. We want to see ourselves as able to view things from all different angles, to accept that people may have things going on in their lives that have them feeling pressured. You know, we can come up with all sorts of reasons why it might be okay that we're receiving this kind of treatment from someone. It's the way we are, you know. We want to be loving. But what we don't see is that there is a big difference between being understanding and forgiving and allowing treatment that makes us feel like crap. It's not that we can never love too much, but it's maybe that we forget that we deserve love also. We're cutting too much slack. if it's coming down to us allowing ourselves to be treated in a way that makes us question our value. So next is going to be some things that might clue you in to the fact that you're making too many excuses and that there has been this line that's been crossed, and it's time to put your foot down because you love yourself. Here goes. If these are things you discover you have been doing and you're not calling your person on them, or if you have called your person on them and it's going through one ear and out the other, it's probably time to walk away. The first thing is forgiving them without receiving an apology. There's nothing wrong with being a sympathetic and forgiving person. That's a positive thing, but you still have to have boundaries. The problem is that those of us who forgive easily can be taken advantage of. We're seen as doormats sometimes because we forgive so easily. Now, something that is clearly toxic is when someone is not able to apologize when they know they've done something wrong. We forgive people because we want them in our lives, but we can't continuously forgive someone who's refusing to acknowledge that they've hurt us. We are owed a genuine apology, and if we're always forgiving without that, it has become a toxic behavior of ours, that forgiving too easily. Another thing you can look for is that if you talk to your friends about your person and find that you either omit things that have happened or you downplay them in a big way, it's time to admit that you're doing that, because you're going to catch a raft of shit from your friends about allowing that. So you're aware these things are not cool. You're aware that you deserve better treatment, and you don't want to deal with the backlash from your friends. So you're just editing your conversations and keeping out those things that you know are going to set them off. A third thing that you could be doing is avoiding certain activities or events that you have always enjoyed very much, but that you know are triggers for your person, triggers for bad behavior. So you're cutting those things out of your life, even though you enjoyed them immensely, because you don't want to deal with the temper tantrums or the bad behavior that's going to come up if you expose your person to these things that you've seen in the past cause some ugly conversations. People with behaviors that can cause eventually a toxic situation for you don't react well to any kind of criticism. You may have tried, and maybe tried very diplomatically, to explain that actions of theirs have bothered you or hurt you, and instead of listening and trying to see what you're saying, they've reacted with anger and outbursts and things that really make you miserable. And so you just don't bring those things up anymore. You don't say if something has hurt you, or if something was very inconsiderate or just plain rude. You just kind of swallow it and continue to tolerate it. You sweep it under the rug, basically. Now, if you are attached to or in love with a person's potential rather than who they are now, it's fine to be optimistic. You know that everyone can grow, everyone can change. But if you're not seeing any indications that your person is working in that direction, if they're not doing any personal work or maybe even seeing a counselor, if they think everything they do is totally cool, that potential's never going to get there. If they are trying to grow, if they are seeking help, then it's fine to give them a chance. But if you have been counting on them changing so that they can eventually reach that potential that you've seen in them all along and nothing is happening, there does come a point you have to admit it ain't gonna. If exciting things happen to you and you find yourself hesitating to share them with your person because they get jealous and try to take you down a notch or two, tell you that you're just full of yourself, it's not that big of a deal. If they steal your joy when you try to share news about things that have been really exciting for you or that make you happy, that's not good. Not good, because you're entitled to be proud of your accomplishments. It's normal to want to share these things, to have someone to celebrate them with you. And you're not even in the least little bit tooting your horn because you might make your person jealous? If you have come to that point where you know that the behavior has caused a toxic situation, and of course I'm including the behavior that you're accepting, but you're keeping your person or these people in your life because they've been in it for a long time, you're making too many excuses. And we're not excluding family here, so I guess I need to place an emphasis on this. Oftentimes, family members are the ones that have some of the most toxic behavior that we encounter. Just because we are family, or we have friends that we've known forever, or a significant other that has been in our life for years, doesn't mean that we should accept bad behavior or anything that makes us feel bad about ourselves and becomes harmful because of that. You may not want to be bringing anything up because, say, if it's a friend, you're afraid that the other friends in that same circle are going to be all over you about hurting their feelings. You may not want to say anything about a family member because then you have to take a raft of shit from your other relatives. You may think, oh, you've been with your partner for so long and you've put in all this time, you don't want to say anything and cause a breakup or a breach in what you have seen as the security of your partnership. Just because you've been tolerating something for a long, long time doesn't mean that you should have. All relationships have to be built on trust and honesty and respect. And if that doesn't come, whether it's family, friends, lovers, whatever it is, and the behavior keeps taking chunks out of your heart, it's time to put an end to it. At the very least, it's time to speak up about it. It's never okay to be supporting unacceptable behavior from others. It's not okay for you, and it's not okay for them. And I'll go a little further into why it's not okay for them when we get into that metaphysical aspect that I mentioned before. We are actually enabling when we allow this to continue. And when we enable, that's not doing anyone any favors. It's not okay to keep our mouth shut about bad behavior. It's very, very important to recognize that people are not entitled to do anything they please and when they please, because they have convinced everyone, including themselves, that they don't have the capability of stepping up to the plate, or that they're not going to play that being kind, being supportive game unless they feel like it. It's never okay. Now, the last thing is kind of a big one, and that is that you make excuses for a person that you wouldn't for anyone else because you know they've had trauma in their lives or difficult circumstances. A bad life does not equate to a bad person. It's not an excuse. Now I know you've had your nice little picture to look at and my little titles popping up, but on that one I had to come back on camera because I am so guilty of this. You know, and you've heard, if you've watched my other videos, that I say people come from their wounds, you know, hurt people. And I have many times made excuses for bad behavior because I know someone has had a challenging past. But what I didn't tell myself at the time, and what I need to remember to tell myself should it come up in the future, is I also have had a challenging life. And I'm not choosing to act that way. I'm not choosing to treat people that way. Yeah, hurt people, but those hurt people still have a choice. If you have had the balls to tell your person that what they're doing is making you feel rotten about yourself, is hurting you, and they're disregarding that, if you've made it clear and they continue to hurt you, it's a choice, people. I have excuses if I want to use them. I don't use them. I may unintentionally hurt people because of patterns I've picked up. But most of the behaviors that we're talking about, if you have pointed out to the person that they are doing damage to you and they continue it, then they are willingly hurting you. Once you make it known and they continue it, they're choosing the sport or whatever they get out of it over you. So why would you make excuses at that point? You've tried. It may have been very hard for you to speak up, and they've disregarded whatever you've said and they continue behavior that is harmful to you. Isn't it time to quit with the excuses? It's just a thought. So, we spoke briefly about enabling. And how that works is, when we make excuses for someone, when we don't ask them to treat us in a way we know we deserve, when we keep making excuses for them, we're actually doing them a disservice. Because basically we're then not saying, but putting, I'm not sure how to explain this. We're telling ourselves that they're not capable of changing. We're telling ourselves that they have a limited capacity to play nice in the world. We're really not giving them any credit for being adults who can analyze their behavior, see that it's not socially acceptable, at least as far as most people would say, and it's certainly not acceptable with someone that they claim to care about. So in a way, we're belittling them to decide that they won't change or can't change. We're saying, they won't do it, they're not capable, so what's the point? We're actually giving them quite a compliment when we bring up behavior that needs to change, because we're giving them credit for being capable. We're giving them credit of being capable of looking at themselves, not seeing it as criticism, but as something constructive, so that they can be perceived in a better view by us and by society. Because, gotta admit, although you may have been allowing it, it hasn't been without resentment. You may have felt it was pointless to bring anything up because you convinced yourself that they couldn't change. But if you didn't even give them a chance, that's unfair to them. So look at it as giving them a compliment. And again, we're not talking an abusive situation where if you bring something up, you're going to get slammed around. These behaviors, I mean, let's face it, we all are capable of bad behavior at times. You know, oh, those PMSy kind of days. You know, women can come up with some pretty hurtful things just because they're feeling really bad and it doesn't take much to set them off. Those days at work that are horrendous and the man comes home and he has been holding it in, not saying anything to his boss, you know, there's a likelihood that a very small thing could set the man off where he is lashing out. So we're all capable of that bad behavior. So we're not talking abuse, but we're talking consistent bad behavior. We don't want to enable it. It would be more respectful and more compassionate if we gave them a chance to address it. Now again, you give them the chance and they disregard it, then they are choosing to hurt you because you've made it known that their actions are doing that. Without giving them the chance, they're never going to know. You're basically letting your person go through life as an asshole, you know? We have to give them credit for being capable. If they show they're not, or they just don't give a shit enough to work on it, then it's up to us. So next we're going to go into why people would choose to tolerate this. It's probably pretty obvious, but you know, if I've gone this far, I might as well keep going, and then we'll get into that metaphysical aspect. I'll be back. Now, why do some of us accept bad behavior and never say anything? There actually have been studies on this. One of the things is that there has been trauma involving that person before. And honestly, to me, this sounds more like it kind of sways into that abuse side of things. But it could be trauma as in fights where you haven't come right out and said anything but have implied that something didn't go over very well and they have blown up, or maybe punished you by not speaking to you, giving you the cold shoulder. It could be that you're afraid of retribution. That may be a legitimate fear, or it may not, but it could be that you're not saying anything because you don't want a friendship to end or a relationship to end. Then you have to ask yourself, is this really the kind of friendship or relationship you want or that you deserve? But we're in the why now. It could be that it's just hard for you to communicate. Maybe you've always avoided conflict and you foresee that there will be conflict, and so you can't even begin to go there. But really the biggest thing is it's a lack of self-esteem. It's going back to what I said before about why I have allowed so much of it in my life. If we don't see ourselves as having any worth or value, then we figure, it's what I deserve. Why would I think I could be treated better? If we see the other person as being more important than us, then we don't ask for more for ourselves. Goes back to that self-love stuff, which is hard. It is, frankly, one of the hardest things there is. If we have come from a place where we've always seen ourselves as less than and everyone else as more. So I'm going to look over here at my cheat sheet, because the way that some of this was worded in an article I read, I wrote down, it's just kind of like plain speaking, which I admire. It says, the only way to change bad behavior is to say some form of no that is not okay. How else do you think society cut back on the use of racial slurs? It was by mocking, shunning, shaming, and speaking out against those who use them. I'm not advocating mocking, shunning, or shaming, just the speaking out part, but I think you see the point. We have an obligation to society to let the buttheads in our lives know that they are acting like buttheads. They deserve a chance to change. See? They deserve that chance. We have an obligation to draw the line. We have to say, this behavior is not acceptable. Otherwise, the behavior never changes. And is that the world you want to live in? Okay, so now we're going to get to that metaphysical aspect that honestly never occurred to me. When we allow someone to treat us in a way that the situation becomes toxic, it may not be abuse in the way that term is normally used, but it is abusive at that point. Now, by not saying anything, by allowing that behavior, it's actually the opposite of being compassionate. We may see ourselves as loving and forgiving, and so we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to criticize them. After all, we've seen how they react to that. We're just going to let the behavior continue. Well, guess what? We're hurting them, actually, because we're letting them accrue bad karma. And I actually feel kind of bad about how much of my life I have overlooked things and not called people out when I think about the karma they may have faced after that. And we're not talking the little stuff. Again, we're talking about repeated bad behavior. And yeah, we covered, maybe they don't know, but you know, let's face it, some of this stuff, it's out there. They would know this is not the way to act on a lot of this stuff. But it is allowing them to rack up some bad shit coming their way. So if you're telling yourselves that you're doing the nice thing for them, no, you're not, because you know that saying, karma's a bitch. I don't know if you have experienced having to pay off karmic debt, but I have, and it's not fun. Karma is not fun. And if we care about someone, we don't want to open up opportunities from our allowing it for them to suffer later. Because a lot of times paying off that karmic debt is suffering. So I think I'm done here. I am getting tired, and so I'm sorry if my energy level has gone down, but I wanted to finish it tonight. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you right now, and then I'm going to shut up. So we've now seen all the reasons that we can't just let this stuff continue and sweep it under the rug. We know that there is never a valid reason to allow these toxic situations to go on in our lives. So what if the toxic behavior is coming from you? We talked about how sometimes you just have to leave a situation if you've tried and tried and tried. We can't leave ourselves. But sometimes we kind of have to open our eyes, which is hard for me right now because I am getting tired. Open our eyes and see that the person that is most toxic in our lives is us. If we're putting ourselves down, if we're speaking to ourselves unkindly, if we're putting ourselves in situations that we know are going to make us feel bad about ourselves. So mainly, I guess, I am just encouraging people to look at the use of toxic in a different way. There can be toxicity all over the place when we look at the things we have looked at, including from ourselves. It never hurts to look at things from different angles. This is mine. Again, if it didn't resonate with you, don't accept it. Guys, I hope there was some value in this. I am so guilty of this one. But you know, as I started to see my own value, and it took work, trust me, I was able to start bringing things up to people. And that was without any of this knowledge about how when we don't say anything, we're not giving them credit for changing. It was just, you know, when you reach a certain level of viewing yourself in a positive way and seeing that you deserve to be treated in a certain way, it's easier to bring things up. And you know, it's not always received well, but at least we can try before we just walk away. Give people a chance. Give yourself a chance. And if you're the one with the toxic behavior, start working on changing that. Give yourself credit. Acknowledge that you're capable of change. Don't see it as criticism. See it as being loving. Because, again, third time's a charm. There's never a valid reason to allow toxic behavior in your life, even, or maybe especially, when it comes from you. Okay.